All right, so we're diving deep today into how your gut health can manifest in some pretty unexpected places.
Yeah, it's pretty wild. We're going to be looking at how your gut can actually speak to you through things like your skin, lungs, eyes, and even hair.
Exactly. And to help us decode these messages, we'll be using Chapter 7 from this book, Integrative Geriatric Nutrition.
It's got some really great insights, and we're going to be focusing on Table 6.1. It's super user-friendly, and it basically connects these common conditions in these areas to potential nutritional deficiencies.
I love that, like a cheat sheet for your health. So let's start with the skin. It's often said that your skin is a reflection of your inner health.
Right, like a billboard.
Mhm.
And one of the first things that jumps out from Table 6.1 is the link between glossitis, that's like an inflamed tongue,
Okay.
and a potential lack of B vitamins, iron, or folate.
Interesting. So if you've been noticing your tongue's a bit red or swollen, it might be worth checking in with your doctor. And maybe take a closer look at what you're eating.
Yeah, definitely. And it's not just your tongue. Cracked corners of your mouth, that's called chylosis, could be pointing to not having enough riboflavin, iron, niacin, or even pyridoxine.
Wow, those are some pretty important nutrients.
They are. And get this, a vertical earlobe crease, you know that little line?
Yeah.
That can sometimes signal potential cardiovascular risks and a possible need for omega-3s and magnesium.
I would have never guessed that. It's fascinating how these seemingly small details can be connected to such important things.
Right. And speaking of connections, let's talk about something a lot of people experience, especially as we get older: dry skin.
Yes, xerosis. The book points out that this affects a lot of older adults, especially women.
Yeah, and it can be caused by a bunch of things like side effects from medication, low fluid intake, or even just living in a dry climate.
And while the advice to drink more water might seem obvious, the book actually recommends aiming for half your weight in ounces of water daily.
Right, like a specific target to help with that hydration.
Okay, I like that. And what about the role of fats, for maintaining that healthy moisture barrier in your skin?
Yeah, that's important too. And they talk about essential fatty acids in the book, especially this one called gamma-linoleic acid, or GLA for short.
I've heard of that. It's found in some plant oils, right?
Exactly.
So maybe incorporating those into your diet more, or even considering a supplement that could be helpful too.
Now let's switch gears a little bit and talk about psoriasis.
Okay.
The book describes it as an autoimmune reaction, meaning your immune system is kind of mistakenly attacking healthy skin cells.
Oh, so it's more than just a skin deep issue.
Right, it's about addressing those triggers, healing your gut, and supporting that immune system. They suggest cutting out inflammatory foods like gluten, sugar, animal fats, alcohol, dairy.
That's a pretty significant dietary shift.
It is, but here's where it gets really interesting. They also mention the potential of topical cannabinoids for psoriasis.
Wait, like CBD oil?
Exactly. Things like CBD and other cannabinoids can be really helpful with inflammation and can help to regulate the immune response.
Wow, so we've gone from earlobe creases to cannabis in just a few minutes. This is fascinating.
I know, right? Yeah, we're just getting started. Let's talk about another condition that affects many people, especially as they age:
Okay.
eczema. They suggest in the book that in older adults, it can be often tied to environmental allergies and a history of sensitivities.
So how do you figure out what those triggers are, especially if the reactions are delayed or not so obvious?
Well, they stress the importance of food sensitivity testing to really pinpoint those triggers. And then they talk about something called an elimination diet.
Okay, I've heard of that. Basically, you cut out common culprits like gluten, dairy, corn, eggs, peanuts, soy, all those usual suspects.
Yep, for about 6 weeks. And then you systematically reintroduce them one by one to see if you notice any reactions.
So it's like playing food detective.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
And this is where the gut microbiome comes in. The book talks about Candida overgrowth.
For those who might not be familiar, Candida is like a type of yeast that naturally lives in your gut.
Right. But if it grows too much, it can throw things off balance and lead to problems, including skin issues like eczema.
So cutting back on sugar and those refined carbs, which can make Candida happy, might be a good strategy.
Absolutely. And while we're on the topic of imbalances, the book also mentions histamine intolerance as a potential driver of eczema flare-ups.
Oh yeah, histamine's that chemical involved in your immune response, right? And it's in a lot of foods too.
Yeah, so if your body has trouble breaking down histamine, you can have those uncomfortable eczema flare-ups. It's like your body's overreacting to it.
So much of this comes back to the gut.
It does.
Ah,
All right, ready to shift from skin and explore what your lungs might be trying to tell you.
definitely. I'm really interested in learning more about COPD. which I know from the source material is a serious condition, especially for older adults.
It is, but there are things you can do to support lung health through things like nutrition and lifestyle. One recommendation from the book is to eat small, frequent meals.
That makes sense, so you're not putting too much pressure on your lungs.
And of course, avoiding toxins is huge, especially for those with COPD. Things like air pollution, stuff you might encounter at work, infections, and of course, smoking.
All important things to be mindful of. But are there any less obvious things people can do, like alternative therapies?
Well, the book mentions Tai Chi and breathwork as being beneficial.
Tai Chi, that gentle exercise, I wouldn't have thought of that for lung health.
It may seem surprising, but the research says it can help people with COPD in a lot of ways, like their quality of life, their mental and social well-being, and potentially even their ability to exercise. It's not about pushing yourself hard, but finding ways to move that support your lungs.
That's so interesting. And what about breath work?
Well, they specifically mention the Buteyko method and techniques described in James Nestor's book, Breath. Shifting to nasal breathing, working on reducing breathlessness, and promoting relaxation.
It's incredible how something as simple as how you breathe can have such a big impact on your health.
Right, it's all connected. Ready to move on to our next stop?
Absolutely. What's next on this fascinating journey?
Let's turn our attention to your eyes, specifically age-related macular degeneration, or AMD. It's a condition that affects a lot of older adults and can lead to vision loss.
That sounds concerning. What causes AMD?
They say a big thing is oxidative damage, and they highlight the importance of boosting your antioxidant intake.
You mean like all those colorful fruits and veggies?
Exactly. But it's not just about eating the rainbow. The book cites a study called AREED2 that found certain vitamins and minerals can help slow down AMD, like vitamin C, E, beta-carotene, and zinc.
So a well-rounded diet is key for eye health too.
Absolutely. And get this, they say that eating DHA-rich cold water fish, like salmon, once a week can cut the risk of AMD in half.
Wow, I had no idea.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. They also recommend reducing animal fats and processed foods, again, to help minimize that oxidative damage.
So it's all about those choices we make, nourishing our bodies from the inside out.
All right, ready to talk about hair.
Let's do it. So we're focusing on alopecia, which means hair loss beyond the typical male or female pattern baldness.
Okay.
The book points to three main culprits: stress, not getting enough of certain nutrients, and food sensitivities.
Stress and nutrition makes sense, but food sensitivities causing hair loss? That's new to me.
It is interesting. The book explains how these sensitivities can cause inflammation in the scalp, which then restricts blood flow to your hair follicles.
Ah, so it's inflammation again wreaking havoc in another part of the body.
Exactly. And when it comes to those nutritional deficiencies, they mention a lack of protein, zinc, iron, and those essential fatty acids as potential problems.
So again, a balanced diet is key. But what about those specific food sensitivities? Which ones should people be on the lookout for? Well, they mention the usual suspects again: gluten, dairy, corn, eggs, peanuts, and soy. They even mention a connection between celiac disease, that's gluten intolerance, and alopecia areata, a specific type of hair loss.
So even if you don't have digestive issues with gluten, it could still be affecting you in other ways?
Exactly. It's so important to listen to your body, pay attention to those signs. Now, before we get into specific diets to address all this, let's take a moment to just kind of reflect on everything we've covered so far.
I like that. It's a lot to take in.
You know, as we've been talking about all these connections, this idea of personalization keeps coming up for me.
Right. It's not a one-size-fits-all approach when it comes to gut health and how it affects everything else.
Not at all. And that's why I find the book's focus on functional testing really interesting.
Okay, can you remind me what exactly that is?
It's like a detailed report card on how your body's handling nutrients, going beyond your basic blood tests. You get a deeper look at what's actually happening.
Ah, so it's kind of like a behind-the-scenes peek into your body. I like that.
Exactly. So, for example, remember how we talked about dry skin and how maybe not having enough GLA could be a factor? Well, functional testing can actually look at how your body's converting the linoleic acid you get from food into that GLA.
So you get real data to make informed choices, not just guesswork.
Right. And the book actually has these really compelling case studies that show just how powerful this personalized approach can be.
Ooh, I love case studies. Tell me more.
All right, so there's this one about a woman named Kate. She was 67 years old and had been dealing with dry skin for years. Like she tried everything, creams, lotions, different dermatologists. Nothing seemed to work long term.
I can only imagine how frustrating that would be.
Totally.
Yeah.
So they did this comprehensive nutritional analysis, including a really detailed omega-3 test. And guess what? Her GLA levels were way low.
So it wasn't just about finding the right moisturizer. There was an underlying issue.
Yep, they started her on a GLA supplement, and within a few months, her skin was so much better. Oh, and her occasional bouts of diarrhea cleared up too, which is a nice bonus.
That's amazing. It really shows how important it is to get to that root cause.
Absolutely. Okay, ready for another one?
Definitely the more the merrier.
Okay, this one's about an 82-year-old man named Steve. He'd had really bad eczema on his legs for, like, decades. It was so bad he could barely stand for long periods or even go golfing, which he loved.
Oh no, that sounds awful. It really highlights how these things can have a huge impact on your life.
It was really getting him down. And like Kate, he had tried tons of creams and stuff, but no lasting relief. When they dug into his history, they found out he had allergies and asthma when he was younger, which made them think food sensitivities might be playing a part.
Interesting. So maybe those sensitivities were contributing to the eczema all these years.
It's possible. They did a food sensitivity test, and it turned out he had reactions to a whole bunch of foods.
So what do? Put him on an elimination diet?
They did. They worked with him to cut out those trigger foods.
Yeah.
And get this, they also tried using topical cannabis oil on his eczema.
Cannabis oil. Wow, that's fascinating.
Right. Remember how we talked about the anti-inflammatory properties of cannabinoids? Well, for Steve, it seemed to really help. Within 6 months, his eczema was almost completely gone.
That's incredible. So it was like a two-pronged approach, addressing internal triggers with diet and then soothing the inflammation from the outside.
A holistic approach at its finest. And it wasn't just his skin. He also had more energy and his digestion improved. They even redid the food sensitivity test after 6 months, and a lot of his allergies had disappeared.
Wow, that's remarkable. When you fix the root cause, it's amazing how the benefits can spread to other areas of your health.
Absolutely. Okay, ready for one last case study?
Bring it on.
This one's about a 69-year-old farmer named Sam who was dealing with COPD that was getting worse.
COPD, that's the lung condition we were discussing earlier, right? Where they recommend eating small meals and avoiding toxins.
That's the one. Sam had quit smoking years ago, but his COPD was still progressing. It was getting harder for him to do things he loved, like taking care of his horses and running his writing business.
That's so sad, having to give up something you're passionate about because of your health. It makes you realize how important it is to take care of ourselves.
It was a really tough time for him. His wife had read about something called inhaled glutathione for COPD, and she wanted to give it a try.
Okay, remind me, what's glutathione again?
It's a really powerful antioxidant that protects your cells from damage. And for COPD specifically, it can help reduce inflammation and oxidative stress in the lungs.
So by inhaling it, you're delivering it right where it's needed.
Exactly. They also suggested he take something called N-acetylhexane orally, or NAC. It helps your body make more of its own glutathione.
Like a double dose of antioxidant power? What else did they do for him?
They also gave him magnesium citrate to help with constipation and encouraged him to try Tai Chi and those Buteyko breathing techniques we talked about.
So they really covered all the bases. Did it work?
It did. Within 3 months, Sam had more energy, his constipation was gone, and he actually really enjoyed doing Tai Chi each day. His wife even started doing it with him.
That's lovely. It sounds like they turned it into a positive shared experience. But what about his COPD? Did that get better too?
After a year, he said his breathing had improved a lot. His lung function tests only showed a little improvement, but he felt a huge difference in his day-to-day life. He wasn't getting winded as easily, and while he still couldn't do super strenuous activities, he was so happy to be able to keep taking care of his horses.
That's wonderful to hear. It's a good reminder that sometimes those subjective improvements in how you feel are the most important, even if the tests don't always show a drastic change.
Absolutely. It's about the whole picture. These case studies are so inspiring, they really make this information come to life.
I agree. They give you hope that positive change is possible. Okay, so we've talked about a lot of different conditions and approaches. What about those therapeutic diets the book highlights?
Right, so they talk about 3 main ones that can really make a difference for your overall well-being and address these issues we've been discussing. First up is the elimination diet, which we already talked about a bit for eczema. It's all about figuring out which foods might be causing inflammation and getting rid of them.
It's like pressing the reset button on your gut.
Exactly.
Oh.
Then there's the Mediterranean diet, which naturally cuts down on those inflammatory foods and might even help with asthma symptoms.
The Mediterranean diet is great. All that olive oil, fish, fresh fruits and veggies, nuts. It's so delicious and satisfying.
It is. And last but not least, there's the anti-candida diet, which is all about managing that candida overgrowth we discussed.
Right, cutting back on those sugars and refined carbs that feed the candida.
You got it. It's about creating a healthier balance in your gut. The important thing to remember about all these diets is that they're not just about losing weight. They can have a huge impact on your overall health.
Yeah, it's incredible how much power we have to influence our well-being through what we choose to eat.
It really is.
Well, this has been such an eye-opening deep dive. Any final thoughts before we wrap things up? What would you like to leave our listeners with?
Yeah, it's really amazing when you think about it. All these outward signs, like your skin acting up or having trouble with your lungs or eyes or even hair loss, they're not just random things happening.
Right, they're like messages from your body trying to get your attention.
Exactly. And what if, instead of getting frustrated or overwhelmed by them, we saw them as opportunities? Chances to really understand what our bodies are trying to tell us and then do something about it.
I love that. Instead of just trying to mask the symptoms, we can be proactive and try to address the root cause. It's like our body's saying, hey, there's something out of balance here. Let's work together to fix it.
And the source material we've been looking at today, especially that Chapter 7 from Integrative Geriatric Nutrition, it gives us some really practical tools to do just that.
Yeah, it's been a goldmine of information. From the importance of gut health to understanding those nutritional deficiencies and food sensitivities, it's really given us a lot to think about.
It has. So next time you notice something like a skin rash or a cough that just won't quit, don't just ignore it. Ask yourself, what's my body trying to tell me?
Yeah, use those clues to become a health detective, and then use this knowledge, all the stuff we've talked about today, to figure out what changes you can make.
Like with those inspiring case studies we talked about, Kate, Steve, and Sam, they all found ways to feel better and live better by getting to the root of their problems.
Absolutely. It's such a good reminder that healing is possible, and it's a journey, not a destination.
Right. So instead of feeling stuck or helpless, we can choose to feel empowered. Our health is in our hands.
Well, this deep dive has been amazing. Thank you so much for sharing your expertise with us today, for walking us through all this incredible information.
You're welcome. It's been my pleasure. Remember, keep listening to your body, keep asking questions, and keep diving deep.
That's a wrap on this episode of The Deep Dive. We hope you enjoyed this journey into the world of gut health and how it shows up in your skin, lungs, eyes, and hair. Don't forget to check out that book we talked about, Integrative Geriatric Nutrition, and all those resources we mentioned. And remember, even small changes can make a big difference over time. Thanks for joining us. We'll catch you next time on The Deep Dive.